At this point, the Trail series seems to represent the quintessential JRPG. If you're a fan of it, it covers all of the things you love. It has excellent storytelling, a significant cast of interesting characters, and a great turn-based combat system. Reverie, which originally came out in 2020 in Japan, finally sees its Western release, and brings to an end many of the stories we've followed for years of not only the characters, but the region of West Samuria. If you've not played the other games, there are options for you here, but I have to say you really should, as this game more than any other harkens back to the series in its entirety. A thanks to the publisher for the review copy, and if you want to save 10% on any of your eShop credit, you can use code SwitchUp again for the month of July, where you'll get 5% off instantly and 5% back in coins over at switchup.gg, and we get a little kickback from Nintendo for that. Is Reverie a fitting end or a cursed conclusion? Well, let's find out. First things first, if you have played the other games on Nintendo Switch, then your save data will be used to reward existing players with several different bonuses, and those I believe are based on your previous instructor rank. They're different accessories, materials, etc., but it is a nice addition. By this point, the Cold Steel series has characters, lots and lots of characters, and in many ways Reverie uses that as both a strength and sometimes a weakness. The first 10 hours will reintroduce you to many that you haven't seen in a long time. This one's set approximately 5 months after the end of the Great Twilight, and the tale is split into 3 separate paths. What's interesting is you can actually switch between these almost whenever you want. Some of them will be limited by the progression in others, but they're designed to play out concurrently and will often reference one another. I personally quite like this, and I can see its intention to streamline the overall narrative. Where it falls back a little is that not all of these are created equally. Lloyd Banning's route is a good example. While it's absolutely ram-packed with fan service, it feels like Crossbell has really had its time in the sun, and the overly heavy emphasis of Lloyd's role in, let's just say, the future of Crossbell, I would have liked to see him stretch his legs a little. The second narrative arc features Rien Schwarzer and is definitely much more interesting. This starts out at such a good pace, while also tying off a few loose ends, but is still relatively safe within the universe. However, by its conclusion, feels quite satisfying. The final arc, and one I will talk almost not at all about because it's by far the best, features a character called C. This unusual masked individual makes for a very interesting and juxtapositional character compared to the other two. There's a wealth of other storytelling to find in here as well for completionists. You can expect to almost double the narrative as far as side quests, chatting, and world lore go. From a gameplay standpoint, there's nothing particularly standout as far as Reverie goes in terms of JRPGs, but it does everything so well. You can move freely around, there are clear objectives, there's a mini-map, a medium map, and a world map that are all brought up with the press of a button, and your next objective is always made clear. Once you've visited a location, you can fast travel between them, and of course there's a handy log for checking past dialogue. You can turn on turbo mode or skip entire reams if you've seen them before. Now, before you get into the gameplay proper, you will be choosing one of the difficulty modes. As you can see, there are numerous, and they range from very easy indeed to absolutely brutal. Alongside this accessibility, if you fall in combat, you can either restart, reload, or try again with a slightly easier version of the same enemy. That's a mechanic I always enjoy. It just removes any potential frustration. Now, I mentioned each of the different routes in the story overview there, and they also have certain gameplay characteristics unique to them. Lloyd has combination crafts, allowing him unique SSS team skills, as well as detective eye to scan enemies for weaknesses as well as potential opportunities. Rien has spirit unification. It's a risk-reward buff which increases his abilities but drains his energy over time. That's probably the perfect time to jump into the combat. The turn-based combat has elements of tactical turn-based in here. You can actually choose to move your characters, often avoiding incoming enemy attacks, which have attack arcs, but due to the sheer number of characters available, teamwork is now more intrinsic to the overall combat mechanics. It includes things like link abilities, and you can change which characters are linked to which others. They'll also have a link level which will increase as you perform more combat instances with them joined. There's a timing element to some of those link attacks. If you target an enemy's weakness or use a correct move at the right time, you may open up an opportunity for one of these link attacks, and by pressing the corresponding button within the time allowed, your partner will rush over and you'll perform more powerful attacks. If, however, there are 5 party members, the new United Fronts moves can be used at a cost, offensively or defensively, and sees the all for one and one for all attacks.
For one, And one for all! Let's go, everyone!
These obviously come alongside the usual array of normal attacks, as well as different arts and skills, with your base moves having slash or pierce damage, and your team having something called brave points. These can be used for brave orders, which will have party-wide effects such as boosting your attack or defense, and you'll need to gradually break the enemy down, which will then make them vulnerable, and this is where you'll be performing your most powerful attacks. What's cool in this game is that your crafts very often will be some of your most powerful moves in the previous game, so your S crafts, and that combined with the base level of 99, it gives the impression of a far more veteran group. As far as character customization, you have Quartz and Master Quartz. They have various statistical boosts, elemental affinities, and to give a comparison if you've not played this series, they're kinda like Materia from Final Fantasy VII. As far as I'm concerned, combat here is the best it's been in the series. Chiefly, it's fast paced and it takes your time seriously. If you want to skip one of those overly long-winded magical moves, you can simply press the plus button. If you want the whole experience to run faster, well, there's a turbo mode for that. And if, like me, you just like to sit back and watch those same moves over and over again, you definitely can. The slight tactical elements for repositioning players and targeting enemy weaknesses, they all go to make Reverie's combat some of the best for any JRPG. Now, the gameplay on the whole does have a few dated aspects, and I mentioned right at the start that its biggest strength is its characters, but having this many to manage can feel quite overwhelming. Also, in its efforts to tie off some of those ends or answer some of the more obscure questions in the series, there are a couple of wonky pacing moments. The excellent combat, and really the series as a whole, it's what a JRPG is all about. Story and gameplay combined, they score 18 out of 20, and controls are okay if not exceptional. That's mainly down to some frame rate drops, particularly in handheld mode as we'll see in the next section. They score 16 out of 20. I believe Reverie runs on the Pyre engine, which is the same as the previous Trails of Cold Steel games. Although they're said to have improved things like the animations, I have to say overall it looks quite dated. It just has that classic 3D PS3 era JRPG look. When you put it alongside some of the more modern ones, even some we have on Switch, such as Xenoblade 3, there's a stark difference in the world building and quality. Now artistically I don't mind the style, and performance is around about 30 FPS when in docked, but handheld mode currently suffers. I saw some significant drops even early on in the game, so if you're a handheld player, I do think there is a patch currently needed. The musical compositions from the Falcom sound team, with the likes of Hayato Sanada, Takahiro Unisuga and many others, are as great as ever. It really does have a cracking soundtrack and often shifts between scenes with some memorable songs, not least its opening theme song, No End No World, performed by Megumi Sasaka. It's just great music. The vocal cast is also decent. I'm afraid I am not a purist. I just don't have the time, especially when a lot of the dialogue is spoken when moving around the world. I don't want to have to read it down at the bottom of the screen. Visuals and performance right now on Switch score 14 out of 20, whereas sound and audio scores 18 out of 20. The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie is going to set you back £53.99 or your regional equivalent, which, let's be honest, is top dollar. With that said, you're looking at about 40 hours in terms of campaign at least, with easily over 100 hours for completionists. It has a 10.1 gigabyte download, and of course, if you're interested, you can go the extra mile and buy the deluxe editions that include the DLC, including, but not limited to, and you guessed it, loads of swimwear. Ay caramba. Still, there's a lot of value here for fans of the genre, but it absolutely wouldn't be a good place to start the series for new players. And the performance, particularly in handheld mode, needs a little bit of work. I give value 16 out of 20.
The very picture of a hero.
Nihon Falcom have brought a fitting end, and fans will definitely be happy. Do I wish for a little bit more, particularly for some of my favourite characters? Maybe, but realistically they have thrown the kitchen sink at it in that regard. It gets an overall SwitchUp score of 82%. I hope this review is of some use to you. Let me know in the comments. I always like to see what you have to say, and as always from Glen and I, just a big thanks for enjoying the channel. If you want to save yourself 10% on this game or any others, use code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg, where you'll get 5% off instantly and 5% back in SwitchUp coins. Alright, to our Patreons and members, thanks very much. And to all of you that enjoy the channel, nice one. Tickle all the buttons. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!